Okay, I think so. We can start now. Hello, and thank you for joining us. We are here today to recognize Indigenous people for their contribution to the natural climate solutions and discuss how to be effective partners with Indigenous peoples and local communities in the development or implementation of natural climate solutions. My name is Santiago Garcia. I'm the Indigenous People and Local Communities Partnership Manager at Environmental Defense Fund. I'm glad to be here hosting this session with my esteemed colleague and friend Juan Carlos Hintiach. Juan Carlos, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you. Thank you, Santiago, for this invitation, and also it's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Juan Carlos Hintiach. I am Shuar Indigenous from the rainforest of Ecuador. I am member of Confenia, Federación Shuar, also Confenia, member of COICA, or actually advising COICA and the international arena following the climate change negotiations, also the biodiversity ecosystem CBD. And right now I am also executive director of the Global Alliance Indigenous Organizations with Territory. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Juan Carlos, for being here today. So, some of us at EDS have the privilege of being invited into local communities in the Amazon River Basin, including yours, to capture the power of nature via first-hand accounts from the people who are on the front lines of conserving tropical forests in Ecuador. We would like to kick off this session by playing your interview from the series titled For the Forest, for our future local wisdom lead, and jump into the discussion from here. So now I'm going to share one video. Give me a second, please.
Mi nombre es Juan Carlos Hintiach. Vivo acá, en la provincia del Napo, en la comunidad de Ichurco. Yo soy parte de la selva. Yo me conecto con mi pueblo, con mi cultura. Es la fuente de vida, es la fuente de inspiración, la fuente de trabajo, fuente de alimento. Es todo para la comunidad. Los bosques tienen amenazas en deforestación, tala ilegal, a industria minera. Y se suma otro factor que es el petrolero, la contaminación de los ríos y de las aguas. Pero todavía tenemos la esperanza, donde vivimos nosotros los pueblos indígenas, de ofrecer el bosque, de ofrecer estos recursos. Nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, trabajamos desde el territorio, tenemos claro nuestro principio. Tú le das una sostenibilidad, servicios ecosistémicos, o le das una alternativa a esas presiones externas que tenemos. Apoyo mucho el tema de los agrosistemas forestales para recuperar terrenos que han sido destruidos con propios productos de la zona. En este caso, el cacao criollo, el cacao tradicional y también la guayusa. La guayusa es un té propio de la zona. Estamos conectando estas iniciativas en la comunidad para que tengan su propia economía, para que puedan vender sus productos en la zona o a nivel internacional. Nosotros creemos que las comunidades considerado, y nosotros hemos dicho, somos socios estratégicos en este proceso. Ya no me consideres un simple beneficiario, porque nosotros podemos ser de la solución para ayudar a salvar el bosque. Todos los pueblos indígenas que vivimos en bosque tenemos y sabemos lo que poseemos. Más del 80% de la biodiversidad está en nuestros territorios. Lo demás está terminando. Lo demás se está destruyendo, pero necesitamos apoyo, ayuda y colaboración para apoyar esos proyectos y poder solucionar esta grave crisis climática.
Thank you, everyone. Watch the video. Maybe a second. Sorry. Okay, Juan Carlos, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Right, thank you, Juan Carlos. In the video, you highlight a few agroforestry efforts that are taking place in your community. Can you explain how efforts like the Wayusa Tea project are set up and financed?
Yeah, thank you, Santiago. For me, for many indigenous leaders and families who will live in the communities, we live with the rainforest, we live in the connected with the resources, water, forests and animals, etc., etc. But also, I just want to remark that we are under a lot of threat. That was part of my opinion and trying to share that these threats like illegal mining, these threats like corruption in some local governments, these threats about deforestation, and also we can see daily how this land is getting degraded. So to get access to funding or financing, to fight against these threats or to promote on how to protect the pristine area forest that we have. This is a real challenge, but sometimes we are looking good partners to bring our voices, to bring our demands. And that is why daily we are working as a community member, as a part of the communities, and with my brothers and sisters or the leaders on the ground. We are always developing initiatives, and we need to connect with resources to protect the forests, to keep the forest and the tree there, and to use that in the sustainable way. So that is very, in general, the panoramic, but we are the challenge. There are some good and great initiatives, but now the connect with the finances, resources, that is another topic and maybe a challenge that we need to follow up.
Thank you. You make a mention about partners and how partners are critical for support this activity. So what kind of characteristics are needed in the partners to scale up and support initiatives like this one, for example?
For example, in the different ecosystems or different areas that we have, indigenous people we are living, we know what we have. There is a lot of pristine forests. There's a lot of hotspots that are beautiful ecosystems, but it's a dangerous situation. If we are going in the way out some developed countries, so politics, so some strategics, very bad planification is going to be. It's not going to be time to protect. It's going to be destroyed. The contamination, the rivers, the waters, etc., etc. But the initiatives are there. Initiatives from recover and protect the land use that was used. Deforestation, degradation. So that the initiatives like is at all using the system chakra, using the system that indigenous people how they're managing their own territory. These initiatives, I think, so that we need to connect with good partners who wants to work with nature, who wants to support conservation and the people. Nature conservation, biodiversity, forests, and people. And these initiatives connect with initiatives that we have on the ground, like our own initiatives, like, for example, I can bring here maybe cocoa, the traditional cocoa, and then also we have a tea, traditional tea we call Wayusa. So this is some key examples that we are working with some families, organize ourselves, and we trying to invite and connect good friends and partners. But these partners need to understand how is the value for us, how we can use this to recover and also to protect, to reduce the pressure to the forest, because we need to not keep pushing the destruction of the forest. So this is a challenge that we need to present these initiatives to good partners, and partners need to understand what is the best way to support these initiatives and what is the best way to follow up and trying to work with this.
Thank you. So I think an immediate question that comes to mind after watching your video is how can I support? What is a key message you would like to communicate to any decision maker that watch this, especially companies?
This is very important, Santiago, because when indigenous people in the region, we all the time we talk about our rights, and then we know what rights we have. Second one, these rights, we need to see how the local governments or national governments are respecting and are implementing these rights. I mean, we have collective rights. So these collective rights are under Constitution. We have rights. And then the other element important is that if we follow this, we have the natural rights. So for us, it's very simple to see how is our relation with Mother Earth, forests, resources, with the cultural visions, with the Shuar people, Quechua people. We have our vision how we are have our plans of life, how we are managing our territory. So that is important. That this proposal, this level of understanding is that how you present this to your partners. The partners, they need to understand very honest way what we would like to support, not just one initiative, another initiative. So we have many initiatives, but we need to discuss, we need to talk to partners who wants to support, but why this support is going to be helpful. Because with the support, financial is going to the community directly, the funds going directly to the communities, going directly to these initiatives, helps to family. This is economy, indigenous economy. This is helping to protect and reduce pressure, protect the waters and everything. So you do alternatives. Otherwise, what I mentioned in the video also is that we are under pressure and the threats, and we don't have time in the way how we're looking and see that the destruction is going daily by daily. You see, we are losing a lot forests, we are losing a lot of rivers with contaminations and everything. But these initiatives, not just what I mentioned, there's another more initiatives, whether women are leaders, some communities are leaders. So we need to help to connect this directly funds, but we need to understand, we need to be honestly that how they need to tell us how we need to present it, because the challenge is that you help with what initiatives. And the other challenge is that how you develop the next steps to sell these initiatives, to do in the market, to do these promotions. I mean, has to be a collaboration and help from the beginning until the end. So this is going to be important.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. You make a mention about an important word like is respect, respect for Indigenous vision, Indigenous livelihood, and it's an important component in any kind of partnership. So right now, uh, your video features some stark images of illegal forestry. Can you describe for us just how prevalent those activities are in your community and what the real life impact has been? Activities like deforestation, for example.
Yes, Santiago. We need to remark always the indigenous organizations or indigenous people, we are very well organized. We have our own plans of life, we have our protocols, how we consult ourselves, we know what rights we have. So, and then we have the other topic that is governance. But that means that each organization or each indigenous group who are living in the forest, we need to understand what we have it, where we live, and how we are going to do this future management planning. But sometimes this vision is not very well understood. It's not very well connected with public politics. That maybe with the governments. I think so. We need to do more efforts. So this is the challenge to communicate more between the leaders for the governments and the different levels, local level, regional, and national. So because this is important, because what is happening or decisions making on the national, we need to implement on the ground. But the ground sometimes has the challenge that they need to get supported because sometimes in the ground, the leaders or indigenous groups, they have their own plans of life, they have priorities. Because sometimes there's a priority, for example, we're going to mention maybe the mining issue. In some areas and some indigenous groups, the mining issue is a very complex situation. Deforestation issue, legal or sometimes illegal. This is something that we need to reflect, and we need to present these demands from the ground, from the voices, for the people from the front line. This is the challenge that we need to discuss with the government, with the actors in the regionals and partners. So there's a good partners that they need to help us to reflect that, or demands or concerns or necessity. That is why if you want to help, or some organization wants to help and to combat, to help against deforestation, we need to understand how or why is happening this. Because for us, the necessity is there because we need to live the forest. Otherwise, we need to see what is good or bad, because we also have necessities inside in the Amazon basin. Because many of the people we have, we are related with other intermediary people that are coming to buy wood, to buy forests, to make deals, business. I mean, we talk to many people. So this is social and the concerns also. So I have forests in my territory. When I go back, go back and see the forest, I say, this is my supermarket. This is my territory. I can eat here. I can sell one tree because my kid is going to get sick, or my kid needs to go to the school. So this is a daily situation. So sometimes when that does not happen, my leaders, families, they're going to see the forest, to cut and sell it, to see as an income. So this is very key discussions of what you want to do with the forest, what they want to do with forest, but you have to give options, alternative. That is why I present these initiatives like agroforestry, using pristine fruits with the trees with forests. There's many other initiatives. So this has to be connected and reflected. Otherwise, my people is going to continue, not only my people, indigenous people and local communities, we are under pressure that maybe that's the situation. We don't want to continue looking the outsiders, intermediaries came to keep destroying, making deals to the forest. That's why we want to reduce the pressure with initiatives, agroforestry, and then give it some more ideas from the ground. And that's why my organizations, my federations, the communities, they're doing this challenge, and we need to connect the financial resources with partners in this way to help that. So not only Wayusa, there is a call, etc., also with following the plans of life. Every indigenous organization, they have their own plans for economic, for spirituality, for tourism, etc.
Plans of life are important, and also it's important to highlight your call for incorporate indigenous leaders in the local governance is very important. So now I'd like to move ahead. Okay. So thank you, Juan Carlos. Now we will turn our attention to the second video that is in part of this series, highlight our colleague Tuntiat Katan and his community based on the Taisha region. So I'm going to share the video.
Mi nombre es Tuntiac Catán, soy de esta tierra, por un lado es Tutinenza, y este lado del río es parte del territorio de la comunidad Pampans. Estas dos comunidades fueron fundadas por mi abuelo. El bosque, la selva, es la vida misma, es la esencia de vida. Es la base fundamental de la vida de una comunidad, es la base fundamental de la persistencia o la pervivencia de una cultura. Ese bosque en realidad nos cuida, nos da la vida, nos protege, nos alimenta, pero también nosotros tenemos que cuidar. La ciencia nos está diciendo ahora mismo que los pueblos indígenas realmente están administrando los territorios, los bosques, y gracias a su sabiduría, pues todavía quedan naturaleza en el planeta. Toda esa herencia que tenemos desde la cultura, los abuelos, ellos estaban conscientes de que esos árboles tenían vida y tenían su espíritu. Los conocimientos de un abuelo, de un papá, tenían que pasar hacia el hijo o hacia el joven. O sea, cada paso te va diciendo la significancia de ser de esa plantita, de ese árbol. Hoy tengo dos opciones: o conservo o le tumbo esa selva y produzco. Me gustaría trabajar en temas de conservación con enfoque al saber de mi cultura. Pero esa conservación tiene que tener un mecanismo que genere ingresos para mí y para la familia y la comunidad. Existen diferentes mecanismos y financiamientos públicos y privados para preservar la naturaleza, la biodiversidad, los bosques que nos quedan en el planeta. Es momento de que nuestras organizaciones indígenas haya apoyo para diferentes emprendimientos como conservación, restauración o producción sostenible, respetando sus territorios, respetando su sistema comunitario, respetando su sistema económico propio, apoyando y haciendo que su plan de vida que tiene cada pueblo y nacionalidad sea el instrumento para protegiendo a los bosques. Estamos llegando a un punto de inflexión, a un punto de que la naturaleza ya no se puede recuperar por sí misma. La Amazonía no se puede recuperar por sí misma. Cuidemos el planeta, el único planeta que nos queda. La responsabilidad es nuestra, la responsabilidad es de todos.
Okay, Juan Carlos, can you hear me? Tuntiat made a great point saying that he's got two choices, to conserve the forest or cut it down, and that deforestation is the only option that makes it possible to provide for his family. At COP27, we heard many world leaders voice support for the conservation of forests. What is actually needed from them to ensure the conservation includes a mechanism to support Tuntiat and his community?
Santiago, I think so that my brother, my leader, Tuntia, was mentioned is that this is something daily concern that we have this forest. We need to invite good partners, good friends to understand us, how we are living, what that means for us, the rainforest, and how we connect us with the land, with the territory and the governance. But conservation is because we are one. I mean, conservation, indigenous people, from our culture, we are very well connected. But there's a lot of pledge, a lot of promises that we need to connect that directly to these initiatives or to these demands. How we are going to help to the leaders, to families and communities to keep protecting and conserving the values from the cultural connections, from the visions, and also to protect this pristine forest. Conservation, we are doing conservation, but sometimes this is not very well reflected, very well understood. We can do these initiatives with respecting the plans of life. That is why plans of life for us, this is a central, a vertebral decisions. This is from the beginning, because then you can decide how you're going to manage your own territory. The title, securing rights, securing your territory, and then doing the initiatives for women, for elders, and for the people. Conservation, forests, we the people. Without us, that nothing is going to happen. We are important there. We are going to manage that. So that is my I think so. The point of view that my brother and the leader is concerned from himself and other families also in the base. Otherwise, you are going to see how the forests are disappearing. There is going to be deforested day by day. So we are the actors. We need help, collaboration, and also we can save this planet.
Juan Carlos, we have less than 1 minute, so I would like to know before to close the session, how can carbon crediting support the goals and ambitions of community like yours of Tuntia? Shortly.
No, I mean, this is an opportunity for us, because if we connect these presentations with the forest that we have also opportunity to understand, and that's what COICA, other organizations, we are following with the guidance TFCI, with high forest value, the tropical forest credit, everything guidance. That's what I was mentioning, that this is something opportunity. We need to connect. And there's some indigenous leaders that we are ready to understand and go for it. And we cannot lose the opportunity. This is an opportunity to support us, to protect us, and to help to develop plan of life. Let's do it. That is why the value that we need to understand for our people, and also how we can connect with carbon credits and other opportunities, but to help people, to help us, the governance, etc., initiatives.
That's great, Juan Carlos. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you everyone for attending this session. If you want to know more about the Tropical Forest Credit Integrity Guide for Companies, you can visit that website, that appears on the slide. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.